She called me low class at my own son's wedding. My name is William Bennett. I'm 59 years old and I've been a janitor for 32 years. What Caroline didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the low-class janitor she was humiliating owned the building we were standing in, and 126 others just like it, worth $87 million. But that wasn't even the best part. See, while Caroline was calling me poor, her entire rich family, her father, mother, brother, even her aunt and uncle, they were all actors, hired performers, was paying $7,300 to play wealthy relatives. And I had the receipts. I sat there in my J.C. Penney suit, watching her performance, knowing exactly what I was going to do. I've learned patience from 32 years of being invisible. But some insults require a response. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Stories like this remind us that appearances can be very deceiving. Here's how a simple custodian taught a fake socialite that class isn't about money, it's about character. Let me paint you a picture of how people saw me that day. Navy blue janitor uniform with William embroidered on the chest pocket. 14-year-old Honda Civic with a dented rear bumper and 198,000 m on it. Steel-toed work boots that I'd polished but couldn't hide the wear. When I walked into that Chicago history museum for my son David's wedding, 3 separate people asked if I was there to fix something. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago's Pilsen neighborhood. $1,200 a month, rent. Controlled building. I've been there for 23 years. Same furniture, same TV from 2016, same everything. To anyone looking, I was exactly what Caroline thought I was, a working-class father who'd somehow scraped together enough to attend his son's wedding. Caroline had been in my son's life for 2 years. Years of me trying to connect with the woman who was going to be my daughter-in-law. The first time David brought her over, she took one look around my small apartment and asked if I was planning to move somewhere more appropriate before the wedding. When I explained I was comfortable where I was, she smiled, that thin smile rich people give when they're being polite to the help. The pattern started small. Family dinners where Caroline would steer conversations away whenever I tried to participate. Wedding planning meetings I wasn't invited to because Caroline was just so busy coordinating with her family. Her father was apparently some hedge fund executive who spent summers in the Hamptons. Her mother sat on charity boards and had connections throughout Chicago's elite social circles. They were always traveling, always unavailable, always just out of reach when David suggested our families meet at the rehearsal dinner the night before. Caroline seated me at the back table with the venue staff. When I politely mentioned it might be a mistake, she patted my shoulder and said, "Oh, William, you'll be more comfortable there. You'll have more in common with them." But the worst part wasn't Caroline's behavior. It was watching my son David slowly pull away from me. David, who I'd raised alone after his mother died when he was 8. David, who used to call me his hero. For 20 years it had been just us against the world. I worked triple shifts at Roosevelt High School so he could attend Ignatius Prep. I saved every penny for his college fund. When he graduated Northwestern with honors, I was the proudest father in Chicago. Then Caroline came along and suddenly David was embarrassed by everything about me. He stopped bringing friends to my apartment. He started making excuses. When I invited him for dinner, he'd visit for 20 minutes and spend the whole time checking his phone. When I asked about wedding plans, he'd say Caroline was handling everything and changed the subject. The final sign came 3 months before the wedding. I called David to invite him for our traditional Saturday morning breakfast at Lou Mitchell's, something we'd done every month for 15 years. He said he was busy. Caroline had enrolled them in country club tennis lessons. Dad, he said, and I could hear the strain in his voice. Maybe we should take a break from our Saturday thing. Caroline thinks I need to focus on building a different kind of social network. I hung up that phone and realized my son was ashamed of me. This woman had convinced him that his janitor father was holding him back from the life he deserved. So when Caroline's family was always too busy to meet, when every attempt at connection was deflected, when I was relegated to the margins of my own son's life, I made a decision. If Caroline wanted to play games about family backgrounds and social status, I was going to find out exactly who she really was. I hired a private investigator named Raymond Cooper. $4,200. Best money I ever spent. Let me tell you what I was really risking by staying silent. My relationship with David wasn't just strained, it was dying. In the 2 years since Caroline entered his life, our weekly phone calls had become monthly check-ins. Our Saturday breakfast tradition was gone. He'd moved from calling me Dad to calling me William when Caroline was around, like I was some distant relative instead of the man who raised him. But here's what cut deepest. David didn't know the truth about his success. He thought he'd earned full scholarships to Northwestern and University of Chicago Booth School, 4 years undergraduate, 2 years MBA. He believed he was some kind of academic genius who'd overcome his humble background through pure merit. The reality, I'd paid for every single dollar, $962,000. Total Northwestern tuition was $78,000 a year for 4 years, $312,000. Booth MBA was $115,000 a year for 2 years, $230,000, plus housing, books, living expenses. I'd written every check myself and funneled the money through a scholarship fund I'd quietly established so David would never feel like charity. How could a high school janitor afford that? Because I wasn't just any janitor. Starting in 1995, I'd been buying foreclosed properties across Chicago with $50,000 I inherited when my mother died. Small apartment buildings, commercial spaces, anything banks were desperate to sell. While David was growing up, I'd reinvest every rental dollar into the next property. By 2010, I owned 47 buildings. By 2020, 93. Today, 127 properties generating $340,000 in monthly rental income. But I kept working at Roosevelt High. Same Navy uniform, same janitor duties, same 6:40 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. schedule. The kids called me Mr. I knew their names, their struggles, their dreams. When budget cuts threatened the music program, I anonymously donated enough to save it. When the heating system failed in the middle of winter, I paid for the emergency repairs. The school board never knew their head custodian was quietly keeping their district afloat. Lived in that small apartment by choice. Drove that beat-up Honda by choice. Wore second-hand clothes by choice. I'd seen what money could do to people, how it could corrupt values, destroy families. create entitled children. I wanted David to grow up with work ethic, humility, gratitude. I wanted him to succeed because of his character, not because of his trust fund. Now Caroline was convincing him that his working class father was an embarrassment. She was rewriting our history, making him ashamed of the man who'd sacrificed everything for his future. If I stayed silent at this wedding, if I let her complete this transformation, I would lose my son forever. David would marry a woman who'd built her entire relationship on lies. He'd spent his life apologizing for his background, trying to live up to fake standards set by hired actors. He'd raise my grandchildren to be ashamed of their grandfather's honest work. But there was something else at stake, something that went beyond my personal relationship with David. Caroline was committing fraud. She'd hired actors to pose as her family, created fake business credentials, lied about her education, her background, everything. She was manipulating my son with calculated deception. If she could lie about something this fundamental, what else was she lying about? How far would she go to maintain this illusion? The financial implications alone were staggering. This wedding was costing $85,000. Caroline had insisted on the Chicago History Museum, designer everything, top-shelf liquor, live band. She'd put most of it on credit cards, assuming David's family would eventually help pay. She was counting on marrying into what she thought was old money, planning to milk my supposed wealth for decades. She had no idea the wealth was real, and that I was about to cut off her access to it permanently. The detective's report was sitting in my hotel room. 27 pages of evidence that would destroy everything Caroline had built. The question was, did I have the courage to use it? June 15, 2024. The wedding ceremony started at 3:30 p.m. at the Chicago History Museum. Beautiful venue, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, Florida ceiling windows overlooking Lincoln Park, the kind of place that screams old money and social status. Exactly what Caroline wanted. I arrived 20 minutes early in my best suit, a navy blue from J.C. Penney that I'd bought specifically for this day. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean and pressed. I was proud to be there for my son. The usher, a young man in a tuxedo, looked me up and down when I handed him my invitation. Are you here for the ceremony or? He paused, clearly uncertain. I'm the groom's father. His eyes widened. Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. Let me show you to your seat. He started walking toward the front of the venue, but Caroline appeared like she'd been watching for this exact moment. She was stunning in her $8,000 Vera Wang gown, every inch the perfect bride, but her smile faltered when she saw me. No, she said quietly to the usher. The janitor goes in back, family up front. She said it casually, like she was discussing the weather. The usher looked confused, but didn't argue. I was seated in the last row behind the wedding photographers' equipment. During the ceremony, I watched my son David stand at the altar in his perfect tuxedo, looking happy and nervous. When he said his vows, his voice cracked with emotion. He meant every word. Caroline's vows were flawless, memorized, delivered with practiced grace. She talked about building a life worthy of our families' legacies. After the ceremony came family photos. The photographer, a professional woman in her 40s, was setting up group Shots on the museum's grand staircase. All right, let's get immediate family. She called out. Caroline's family gathered first. Her father, who she'd introduced as Charles Harper III, hedge fund principal, was a distinguished man. In his 60s with perfect silver hair and a buy-in suit. Her mother, Patricia, was elegant in Chanel, dripping with pearls. Her brother James looked like he'd stepped out of a Wall Street recruitment poster. The photographer looked around. And where's the bride's grandfather? Caroline followed her gaze to where I was standing off to the side, waiting patiently. Oh God, no. Caroline laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. That's the groom's father. He cleans buildings. She gestured dismissively. David, come tell your photographer about the family arrangements. David looked at me then at Caroline, then back at me. For a moment I thought he might say something. Instead, he walked over to the photographer and whispered something. She nodded and continued with photos that didn't include me. The cocktail hour was worse. The venue was filled with Caroline's social circle. Young professionals who worked in finance, law, consulting. They wore designer suits and dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I stood near the bar, nursing a glass of water, watching my son work the room like he'd been born to it. 3 different people asked if I was part of the catering staff. 2 others wondered if I was there to fix the air conditioning. When I politely explained I was the groom's father, they'd nod awkwardly and find reasons to move away from me. But I was watching more than just the social dynamics. I was studying Caroline's family. Her father, Charles, was holding court near the fireplace, telling stories about his hedge funds' latest acquisitions. Her mother, Patricia, was discussing her charity board positions with a group of women. Her brother, James, was networking aggressively, handing out business cards for his Silicon Valley startup. They were smooth, professional, convincing, but I noticed small things. Charles kept checking his phone like he was reading from a script. Patricia's stories about her charity work were vague on details, but heavy on named dropping. James mentioned Stanford Business School 3 times in 10 minutes like he was making sure everyone heard it. By 7 o'clock, I'd made my decision. I excused myself and walked to my Honda Civic in the parking lot. From the glove compartment, I pulled out Detective Cooper's report in my phone. Raymond, it's William Bennett. Are you available tonight? Of course, Mr. Bennett. Did you decide? I decided. And you be at the Chicago History Museum by 9 p.m. Bring everything we discussed. The full package, actor, photos, financial records, phone records, everything. And Raymond, bring Sharon Martinez and Dr. Richardson. Tonight, everyone learns the truth. As I walked back toward the reception, I could hear the live band starting their first set. Through the windows I saw Caroline dancing with her father. The man I now knew was named Gregory Stone, commercial actor hired for $2,500 to play a hedge fund executive. In 2 hours, this beautiful lie was going to crumble. The reception was in full swing. By 7:45 p.m., the Chicago History Museum's main hall had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Round tables with white linens and gold charger plates, orchid centerpieces that probably cost $300 each. A 12-piece band playing jazz standards while couples danced under crystal chandeliers. I sat At table 9, not with family, but with David's college friends and their dates. Nice kids who tried to include me in conversation, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. How did this janitor end up at such an elegant wedding? My phone buzzed. A text from Sharon Martinez is my property manager. Building 47 tenant called about heat. Approved the $3,400 repair will handle. Monday. The woman next to me, David's Northwestern classmate, noticed me checking my phone. Everything okay? Asked politely. Just work, I said. Property maintenance never stops. Assumed I meant I was a maintenance worker somewhere. I didn't correct her. Another buzz, this time from James Murphy, my accountant. October rent roll. Finalized. $347,000. Total. Investment property tax review. Tuesday. I was about to put my phone away when it rang loud enough that people at my table looked over. Excuse me, I said, stepping away to take the call. Mr. Bennett. It was Dr. Helen Richardson from Northwestern University. I hope I'm not interrupting your son's wedding, but I wanted to confirm your attendance at next month's donor recognition ceremony. The president specifically requested you be honored for your scholarship endowment contributions. I glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. Dr. Richardson, this isn't the best time. Of course, I understand. I just wanted to mention that David will be receiving a special recognition as well as a scholarship recipient who exemplified the values of the Bennett Family Education Fund. He still doesn't know you're the donor. Correct. That's correct. And I'd like to keep it that way. Absolutely. Your anonymity has been preserved throughout. I'll speak with you next week about the ceremony details. I hung up and noticed Caroline's brother, James, standing nearby, clearly having overheard part of the conversation. He was studying me with new interest. You're in education? He asked. Something like that, I replied. Before he could probe further, Caroline's voice rang out over the microphone. She was about to give her toast. But as I walked back to my table, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Detective Cooper. Just arrived. Parked outside, Dr. Richardson and Sharon Martinez en route. Are you sure about this timing? I type back quickly. Wait for my signal. Let them finish their speeches first. Another text came through. This one from an unknown number. Mr. B, this is Marcus from Roosevelt High. Saw on Instagram you're at a fancy wedding. Hope your son knows how lucky he is. You're the best teacher we ever had, even if you just cleaned the floors. I smiled despite everything. Marcus had graduated 3 years ago, first in his family to go to college. I'd helped him with his Northwestern application essays during lunch breaks, in the janitor's closet that doubled as my office. As I put my phone away, I caught Caroline watching me from across the room. She was standing with her mother, Patricia, both of them looking in my direction with expressions I couldn't quite read. Caroline leaned over and whispered something to Patricia, who nodded knowingly. They were planning something. I could feel it. The band finished their song, and Caroline's father, Charles, took the microphone. He looked every inch at the successful hedge fund executive. Confident posture, expensive watch. Catching the light, voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. As father of the bride, I want to share A few thoughts about family, legacy, and the importance of choosing your associations wisely. He paused, his eyes finding mine across the crowded room. We Harpers have always believed in marrying up. Not another paused longer this time. Sideways. The room was completely silent. Every guest understood exactly what he meant. Charles raised his champagne glass to David and Caroline. May their union elevate them both. As the room erupted in applause, I felt my phone vibrate one more time. A text from Detective Cooper. Standing by, ready. When you are. It was almost time. By 9:00 p.m., the champagne had been flowing for over an hour. Caroline was flushed and animated, clearly feeling the effects of the alcohol and the praise from her wedding guests. Her fake family had performed brilliantly throughout dinner, telling elaborate stories about the Harper family legacy, their Greenwich estate, their connections to Chicago's elite social circles. Now it was Caroline's turn to speak. She took the microphone from the band leader, swaying slightly as she found her balance. The room fell quiet, 240 guests turning their attention to the radiant bride. Thank you all for being here tonight. She began, her voice carrying clearly through the venue sound system. This has been the most perfect day of my life. Applause rippled through the room. David was beaming at her from the head table, completely unaware of what was coming. I want to thank my incredible family, Caroline continued, gesturing toward Charles, Patricia, and James. They've shown me what real class looks like, what it means to have standards, what it means to never settle for less than you deserve. More applause. I sat perfectly still, watching this performance unfold. And I want to thank my new husband, David, she said, turning toward him with a bright smile. David, when I met you 2 years ago, I saw potential. I saw a diamond that just needed the right setting, someone who could rise above his circumstances. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I'm honestly just grateful that our children won't have to grow up around. She paused, letting her eyes scan the room until they found me. That kind of environment. No offense, William, but you understand. She gestured dismissively in my direction, and I felt 240 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The weight of their stares was crushing. Some looked confused, others embarrassed. For me, a few were clearly enjoying the drama. David said nothing. My son, who I'd raised alone for 20 years, who I'd sacrificed everything for, sat silent at the head table while his bride publicly humiliated his father. Caroline wasn't finished. I mean, let's be honest, she said, her voice getting louder and more confident. We all know there are different kinds of people in this world. There are people who build things, who create value, who contribute to society. She raised her champagne glass toward her fake family. And then there are people who clean up after them. A collective gasp went through the room. This wasn't just rude anymore. It was cruel. I just want everyone to know how grateful I am that David chose to elevate himself. He chose quality. He chose class. He chose. She paused for dramatic effect. Better. That's when she made her fatal mistake. Emboldened by the alcohol in the audience, Caroline decided to go even further. I mean, can you imagine? David could have ended up like his father, working with mop buckets and toilet brushes. She pointed directly at me, laughing. But instead, he chose me. He chose the Harper family. He chose a future worthy of his potential. The laughter that followed was scattered and uncomfortable. Most guests looked mortified. Even Caroline's hired family seemed surprised by how far she'd gone. So, here's to David. Caroline raised her glass high. For having the courage to leave his past behind and embrace the life he was meant to live. As she drank, the room erupted in scattered, awkward applause. Some people were clapping because they didn't know what else to do. Others were whispering to their table mates, clearly shocked by what they just witnessed. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. The sound cut through the applause like a knife. Caroline noticed immediately. "Oh, this should be good," she said into the microphone, not bothering to hide her amusement. "William, did you want to say something? Maybe share some wisdom from the janitorial arts?" More uncomfortable laughter from the crowd. I could see people pulling out their phones, some already recording. I walked calmly toward the front of the room, my footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet space. Caroline handed me the microphone with a smirk, clearly confident that anything I said would only reinforce her point about class differences. "Thank you, Caroline," I said quietly into the microphone. My voice was steady, controlled. "I do have something to say." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder, the same folder I'd carried from my hotel room. It was thick with documents held together with rubber bands. "But first, I have a question for you." Caroline's smile faltered slightly. She hadn't expected this. "Who is Gregory Stone?" The color drained from Caroline's face. Instantly, behind her, the man she'd introduced as Charles Harper III went rigid in his chair. "I'm sorry, what?" Caroline stammered. "Gregory Stone," I repeated, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. Actor. Currently appearing in advertisements. SAG-AFTRA member since 2019. The silence was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Or maybe I should ask Charles Harper. I turned toward Caroline's fake father. "Actually, let me ask you directly, Greg. How much is Caroline paying you to play her father tonight? Because I have the Venmo receipts right here, and it shows $2,500. Is that correct?" Gregory Stone, the man who'd been playing Charles Harper III all evening, stood up abruptly, his face pale. He looked at Caroline, then at the crowd of guests who were now staring at him with growing realization. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," he said. But his voice had lost all the authority and confidence of the hedge fund executive he'd been portraying. "No misunderstanding," I said calmly. "Gregory Stone, age 62, Chicago talent. Agency, commercial actor specializing in distinguished businessman roles." I opened my folder and pulled out an 8x10 headshot. Even from across the room, people could see it was clearly the same man. "Should we discuss Diane Crawford next?" I asked, turning toward Caroline's fake mother. "Or would you prefer to tell everyone yourself who you really are?" The Chicago History Museum's elegant reception hall had gone completely silent. 240 wedding guests sat frozen in their chairs, phones out, recording every word. Caroline stood at the front of the room, looking like she'd seen a ghost. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, my voice calm and measured, "I'd like to introduce you to the real Harper family." I pulled out the first document. From my folder. This is Gregory Stone. 62 years old. Commercial actor. Represented by Chicago Talent Agency. His most recent work includes a Cialis commercial that aired during the Bears game last Sunday. I held up his hedge shot so the entire room could see. The resemblance to Caroline's father was unmistakable. Gregory himself had gone completely pale and was looking toward the exit. Greg was hired for $2,500 to play Charles Harper III, hedge fund principal, for this weekend's events. Have the contract right here. I unfolded a printed email chain between Caroline and the talent agency. Quote, need distinguished older male actor to play wealthy father. Must be comfortable. Improvising stories about hedge fund management and country club lifestyle. Wardrobe provided payment $2,500 for weekend engagement. The gasps from the audience were audible. Now, people were turning to each other, whispering, pointing. Caroline's face had gone from pale to bright red. But, wait, there's more. I continued, maintaining the same calm tone. Diane Crawford, age 57, theater actress and waitress at the Pump Room restaurant. Currently playing Patricia Harper, charity board member and junior league president. I held up another hedge shot. Caroline's mother was now standing, looking desperately at Caroline for guidance that wasn't coming. Diane's fee, $2,200. Her instructions were to act dismissive toward the groom's working-class father and emphasize the Harper family's elite social connections. Another document. Kevin Mills, age 31, fitness instructor and aspiring actor, playing James Harper, Stanford MBA and Silicon Valley entrepreneur. Fee, $1,800. Caroline's brother was already walking toward the exit, clearly wanting no part of whatever was coming next. Total cost for Caroline's fake family, $7,300. Paid through Venmo over the past 6 months. I pulled out my phone and opened a screenshot. Here's the payment history. Gregory S. Wedding family. Diane C. Mom. Performance. Kevin M. Brother. The room erupted in murmurs. People were standing now trying to get a better view of the documents I was holding. But the really interesting part, I continued, is what Caroline told them about me. I unfolded a print out of text messages. This is from Caroline's burner phone, which she accidentally left in my son's apartment bathroom last month. Caroline made a sound like a wounded animal. William, please text to Gregory. Remember, you're Charles Harper III. Hedge fund. Greenwich, Connecticut. Childhood. Yale. Act dismissive of the janitor. Make it clear we're better than him. More gasps. Several people were openly laughing now, but not in a cruel way. In the way people laugh when they realize they've been watching an elaborate performance. Text to Diane. You're Patricia, old money family. The cold to his father. Make sure everyone knows we are the elite ones here. Looked directly at Caroline. She was trembling now, tears starting to form in her eyes. And my personal favorite, I said, pulling out another screenshot. Group chat with all the actors. Big payday this weekend. Play your parts perfectly. The groom's father is low class, a literal janitor. Make sure everyone knows we are the elite family. The room was in complete chaos now. People were talking loudly. Some were leaving. Others were recording everything on their phones. David was sitting at the head table looking absolutely stunned. Now, I said, raising my voice slightly to get everyone's attention back. Let me tell you about Caroline's real family. I pulled out another set of documents. Caroline and Kowalski, name legally changed to Caroline Harper 3 years ago. Court records from Cook County Courthouse. Caroline was crying openly now. Stop, she whispered. Please stop. Parents. Whereabouts unknown. Caroline was in foster care from age 12. Education. 1 year at Truman College before dropping out. Current employment. Receptionist at Lakefront Dental. $38,000 per year. Let that sink in for a moment. Current debt. $68,500. In credit cards and personal loans. Mostly used to maintain her fake lifestyle. Then I smiled for the first time all evening. But you know what, Caroline, there's nothing wrong with any of that. Foster care kids deserve love and success. Community college is perfectly respectable. Dental receptionist is honest work. The problem isn't your background, it's the lying. Pulled out the final set of documents from my folder. Because while you were calling me low class, while you were hiring actors to pretend to be your rich family, while you were telling my son to be ashamed of his janitor father, you had no idea who you were really talking to. I held up a property deed. This is the deed to the Chicago History Museum building. Guess who owns it? The silence was absolute. That's right. The low-class janitor owns the building you're getting married in tonight. I pulled out another deed. And this building and this one. And this one. Document after document. Property after property. 127 buildings. Total, residential and commercial. Properties throughout Chicago. Current portfolio value, $87 million. The crowd erupted. People were standing, shouting, trying to see the documents I was holding. Monthly rental income, $340,000. But I kept working as a janitor because I loved those kids at Roosevelt High, and because I wanted my son to grow up with values. I looked directly at David, who was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. David, remember those scholarships you got to Northwestern and University of Chicago? The ones you thought you earned through merit? He nodded slowly, looking confused. Pulled out one final document. There were no scholarships, son. Your father, the low-class janitor, paid $962,000 for your education. Every penny in cash. David's face went white. He looked like he might faint. The Bennett family education fund at Northwestern. That's me, David. I donated $1.8 million to establish that scholarship program. Your scholarship came from your father's money. Complete pandemonium. The room was chaos. People were shouting questions. Caroline had collapsed into a chair sobbing. I handed the microphone back to the band leader and walked calmly back to my table, leaving 240 wedding guests to process what they'd just witnessed. The janitor had just exposed the fake rich girl, and everyone had seen it happen. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Gregory Stone, Caroline's fake father, was the first to break. He stood up abruptly, ripped off his expensive suit jacket, and threw it on the floor. I'm done, he announced to the room. Lady, you're crazy if you think I'm staying for whatever comes next. He walked straight toward the exit, pulling out his phone as he went. I could hear him on the call. Yeah, it's Greg. Cancel my headshot session tomorrow. I think my commercial acting career just took a hit. Diane Crawford, The fake mother was right behind him. She'd already stripped off the borrowed pearl necklace and was gathering her purse. "This is harassment," she called out, though it wasn't clear who she was talking to. I was hired to play the role. Nobody said anything about public humiliation. Caroline's fake brother, Kevin, had disappeared entirely during my revelation speech. Smart move. That left Caroline standing alone at the front of the room, her $8,000 wedding dress wrinkled, her makeup ruined by tears, watching her elaborate deception crumble in real time. "William," she said, her voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "I can explain everything. Can you?" I walked back toward the front of the room, carrying my folder of evidence. "Can you explain why you told my son his father was an embarrassment? Can you explain why you spent $7,300 on fake family members when you knew David thought we were struggling financially?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Meanwhile, the wedding guests were having their own reactions. Some were laughing and applauding. They'd realized they'd just witnessed the most epic wedding drama in Chicago history. Others looked uncomfortable and were quietly gathering their things to leave. A few were openly recording with their phones, clearly planning to share this story. But the most important reaction was David's. My son was sitting at the head table, staring at the documents spread across the floor where Caroline had dropped them. Property deeds, tax returns, bank statements, proof of a fortune he'd never known existed. "Dad," he said finally, his voice cracking, "is this real?" I walked over to him and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's all real, son. Every word. But why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think we were poor?" Before I could answer, Caroline suddenly came to life. She rushed toward David, grabbing his arm. "David, don't listen to him. He's trying to break us up. He's jealous because you chose me over him." David looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Caroline, you hired actors to play your family. I can explain that. I was embarrassed about my background. Okay. I wanted to impress you. You called my father low class in front of everyone. I was protecting you. I was trying to help you see that you could do better." That's when Detective Raymond Cooper appeared at my side. He'd been waiting outside for my signal and apparently decided the time was right to make his entrance. "Mr. Bennett," he said quietly, "Chicago PD just called. They want to interview Caroline about the fraudulent business credentials she used to secure wedding vendor contracts, apparently pretending to be from a wealthy family to get credit extensions. Might constitute fraud." Caroline's eyes went wide. "What? No, I never said I was rich to vendors." Detective Cooper pulled out his tablet. "Wedding venue contract. Shows Caroline Harper, daughter of Charles Harper III, hedge fund. Principal, used as collateral for the $85,000 venue fee. Bank records show you don't have the funds to cover that expense. That's just a misunderstanding. Catering contract, same false information. Photographer contract, same thing. You used fictional family credentials to secure over $100,000 in wedding services you can't afford." I watched Caroline's face as she realized the legal implications. This wasn't just about embarrassment anymore. This was about potential criminal charges. "David," she said desperately, turning back to my son, "you have to help me. We're married now. You're my husband. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that made my heart sink. Wedding rings. Caroline, he said softly. I need some time to think about everything that happened tonight. What does that mean? It means I'm going home with my father. And you should probably call a lawyer. The room erupted again. People were applauding, shouting questions, trying to get closer to see what was happening. Several guests were already posting on social media. I could see phones out everywhere. But in the middle of all that chaos, something wonderful happened. David walked over to me and, for the first time in 2 years, hugged me. Like he meant it. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered in my ear. I'm so sorry for everything. You don't have to apologize, son. You were manipulated by someone who's very good at manipulation. But I should have defended you. I should have known better. You were in love. Love makes us do stupid things. Sometimes, as we stood there hugging, I noticed other people approaching us. Dr. Helen Richardson had arrived with Sharon Martinez just as I'd planned. They'd been waiting outside for the right moment to make their entrance. William, Dr. Richardson said warmly. Hope we're not intruding. We came as soon as Detective Cooper called. Not at David. I'd like you to meet Dr. Richardson from Northwestern. She's the Dean of Development. David shook her hand, still looking stunned by everything. David, Dr. Richardson said, your father is one of Northwestern's most generous donors. The scholarship program that funded your education. That was his creation. He's donated nearly $2 million to help students like you succeed. David looked at me with tears in his eyes. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to be proud of your own accomplishments, not grateful for your father's money. Sharon Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Bennett, I hate to interrupt, but we have some urgent property matters to discuss. The Lincoln Park building needs immediate attention, and the Wicker Park renovation is ahead of schedule. Caroline, who was still standing nearby, despite everything, overheard this conversation and realized she was finally understanding the full scope of what she'd walked away from. David, she said one last time, I love you. This doesn't have to end everything. David looked at her sadly. Caroline, I don't even know who you are. As we walked toward the exit, I could hear the wedding guests already turning the evening into the story they'd tell for years. The janitor who owned half of Chicago, the bride with the fake rich family, the wedding where everyone thought they knew turned out to be completely wrong. But all I cared about was walking out of that building with my son beside me. Our relationship, finally based on truth instead of lies. The story exploded across social media. Within hours. By Sunday morning, #fake family was trending on Twitter. Instagram was flooded with videos from wedding guests. TikTok had already created memes about hiring actors to play your relatives, and Facebook was buzzing with shared articles from the Chicago Tribune. Yes, the Chicago Tribune. Turns out the wedding photographer's assistant was actually a freelance journalist who'd been tipped off about an interesting wedding story. She'd captured everything. Caroline's speech, my revelation, the fake family fleeing, David's reaction, her article, titled The Janitor, the Aries, and the $87 million secret went viral by noon. Sunday. The financial consequences for Caroline were immediate and devastating. Monday morning, she was fired from her Job at Lakefront Dental. Her boss, Dr. Patricia Stevens, told her she couldn't employ someone who was under investigation for fraud. By Tuesday, 3 credit card companies had frozen her accounts pending investigation of how she'd obtained credit using false information. The wedding vendors were furious. The Chicago History Museum was threatening to sue for the $85,000 venue fee. The caterer, photographer, florist, and band were all demanding payment for services rendered under false pretenses. Caroline's total wedding debt exceeded $120,000. Money she absolutely didn't have, but the legal consequences were even worse. Detective Cooper called me Wednesday morning with an update. Cook County State's attorney is filing charges: wire fraud, identity fraud, and fraudulent representation. If convicted, she's looking at 2 to 5 years. And the actors, they're cooperating fully. Turns out Gregory Stone has been hired by Caroline for other events over the past year, family gatherings where she needed fake relatives. They have evidence of a pattern of deception. Meanwhile, David was dealing with his own emotional aftermath. He'd moved back into my apartment Sunday night, the same small Pilsen place he'd been embarrassed to visit just days earlier. Now he was seeing it with different eyes. "Dad," he said Tuesday morning over coffee, "I need to understand something. Why do you live here when you could afford anything?" I looked around my modest kitchen, the same Formica counters from 1997, the same refrigerator that hummed too loudly, the same small table where we'd eaten breakfast together for 20 years. Because this is home, David. Because I like Mrs. Is Rodriguez next door who brings me tamales at Christmas. Because I know all the kids in the neighborhood and they wave when I come home from work. Because wealth isn't about what you own, it's about what you value. But you could live in Lincoln Park. You could drive a Tesla. You could retire tomorrow. I could. But then what? Sit in a big empty house counting my money. I'd rather be Mr. B at Roosevelt High, helping kids with their homework. During lunch break that afternoon, David came with me to the school. I wanted him to see what my low-class job actually meant. The reaction from the students was immediate and overwhelming. Word had spread about the wedding drama. High school kids hear everything and they were treating me like a celebrity. Mr. B, Marcus Washington, now a sophomore at Northwestern, had driven down specifically to see me. I saw the news article. "You're like a secret superhero. Is it true you own half of Chicago?" asked Melissa Chen, a senior, who'd been working with me on her college applications. "Not half," I laughed. "Maybe a 16th. But the most meaningful moment came when David watched me work with a struggling freshman named Tommy Kowalski. Yes, the same last name as Caroline's real family name. Tommy was having trouble with algebra and was convinced he was too stupid for school. "Tommy," I said, sitting beside him in the cafeteria during lunch, "let me tell you something. I've been cleaning these halls for 32 years. I've watched thousands of kids walk through here. You know what I've learned? Success isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about showing up every day and doing the work. But algebra is so hard, Mr. B. So is raising my son alone. So is working 3 jobs to pay for his education. So is cleaning vomit off bathroom floors at 6 a.m. But you do hard things because they're worth doing." I helped Tommy work through 3 problems, watched his face light up when he finally understood the concept, then gave him my business card. That's my cell phone number. You call me if you need help with homework, okay? And Tommy, don't let anyone tell you that working with your hands or cleaning buildings makes you worth less than other people. Honest work is noble work. After school, David and I walked to my Honda Civic in the parking lot. Dad, he said quietly, I want to apologize again. Not just for the wedding, but for everything. For being ashamed of you. For letting Caroline turn me against my own father. David, you don't need to keep apologizing. Yes, I do. 'Cause I need you to know that I understand now. I spent 2 years trying to become someone I thought was better than who I really am. But watching you today, seeing how those kids look at you, seeing how much respect you have in this community, I realize I was trying to become someone much smaller than the man who raised me. That evening, we had dinner at Lou Mitchell's, our old Saturday tradition that Caroline had convinced him to abandon. Over pancakes and coffee, David told me about his plans. I'm filing for divorce. Already. Talked to a lawyer. Are you sure? Marriage is a big commitment, even when it starts badly. Dad, she hired actors to humiliate you. At our wedding, she lied about everything. Her family, her background, her education. How do I build a life with someone who lies that easily? And what about your career? Your life in the Gold Coast? I'm giving up the apartment. I want to move back to the neighborhood. Maybe buy a place near here. Help you manage some of the properties. Learn the business from the ground up. You don't have to do that, son. You have your own path. My path led me to marry a woman who hired actors to play her family. Maybe it's time I followed a different path. One that leads back to who I really am. As we walked home that night, I realized something important had changed. For 2 years, I'd been losing my son to someone else's idea of success. Tonight, I was getting him back. 3 months later, on a crisp September morning, I was cleaning the windows in Roosevelt High's main hallway when Principal Clark approached me with the official-looking envelope. William, she said with a smile, this came from the Chicago Public Schools district office. They want to honor you at next month's citywide recognition ceremony. I opened the envelope and read the letter. The Chicago Public Schools Distinguished Service Award for 32 years of exemplary service, mentorship of students, and anonymous charitable contributions that have transformed educational opportunities throughout the district. You know, Principal Clark continued, when the district office called to tell me about your other life, I wasn't surprised. I always wondered how a janitor could afford to anonymously fund our music program, replace our heating system, and provide college scholarships for struggling students. The kids deserved those opportunities, I said simply. Yes, they did. And thanks to you, they got. That afternoon, David met me after work. He'd been true to his word. He'd given up his Gold Coast apartment and bought a small house 6 blocks from mine in Pilsen. He was learning the property management business from Sharon Martinez and had already proven to have a natural talent for it. Dad, he said as we drove to check on a renovation project in Wicker Park, I've been thinking about the wedding, about Caroline. What about her? I keep wondering if I should feel sorry for her. Foster care. No family, struggling financially. Maybe she was just desperate. Maybe she was. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it. The trial starts next month. Detective Cooper says she might take a plea deal. I'd been following Caroline's legal situation through Detective Cooper. The wire fraud charges were serious, but her attorney was arguing for leniency based on her difficult background. There was talk of community service and restitution rather than prison time. David, I said, I want you to know something. I don't hate Caroline. I actually feel sorry for her. You do. She was so desperate to escape her past that she created an elaborate fake future. She hired actors to play the family she wished she had. She lied about her education, her job, her entire life. That's not evil. That's just sad. But she tried to turn me against you. Yes, she did. And that's where my sympathy ends. Because real family is about loyalty, honesty, and love, not about status or money or what kind of suit you wear to weddings. We pulled up to the Wicker Park building David was overseeing. It was a beautiful renovation, turning a run-down apartment building into affordable housing for young families. David was applying everything I'd taught him about maintaining dignity while providing good homes for working people. You know what I learned from all this? David said as we walked through the building, checking the contractor's work. What's that? Class isn't about money. It's about character. It's about doing right by people even when no one's watching. It's about working hard and staying humble. It's about keeping your word and treating everyone with respect. Caroline called me low class, I said, testing the new locks on the apartment doors. But what she didn't understand is that class isn't something you can fake with hired actors and borrowed jewelry. You either have it or you don't. And you have it, Dad, more than anyone I know. That evening, we had dinner at my small kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years. David had his laptop out showing me spreadsheets for our property investments. The Lincoln Park building is cash flow positive for the first time in 3 years, he reported. And the Pilsen renovation should be ready for new tenants by Christmas. Good work, son. Dad, I have a question. What do you want to do with all this wealth? I mean, long term, what's the plan? I'd been thinking about that question for months. I want to create something that lasts. Something that helps kids like Tommy Kowalski go to college. Something that keeps neighborhoods like this affordable for working families. Something that proves you can build wealth while still building community. A foundation, maybe. Or maybe we just keep doing what we're doing. Buying buildings, keeping rents reasonable, helping kids with homework, fixing heating systems when they break. The Bennett Family Foundation. I like that. The Bennett Family Foundation, I repeated. Yeah, that has a nice ring to it. As we cleaned up the dinner dishes, I realized that the wedding disaster had given me something I'd been missing for 2 years. My son back. Not the version of David that Caroline had been creating. Polished, ambitious, ashamed of his background. But the real David, the one who called me Dad instead of William. The one who wasn't embarrassed to live in Pilsen, the one who understood that true wealth isn't about what you own, but about who you are. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been underestimated because of your job, your background, or your appearance, remember this. The most important work is often invisible. Character isn't about titles or bank accounts. It's about integrity, kindness, and staying true to your values, even when it's hard. And if you're watching this, please share your own stories about standing up for yourself, or defending your family. Sometimes the quietest people have the loudest truths too.